Welcome to the MindMatters podcast. Today we are here at Chemo Policy Center. And in this episode, we are going to explore how rights-based and democratic education approaches can support children's social and emotional development. We are accompanied by Pamela Osmani. She is a membership officer at Quest, and she also has an experience in education as an educator in Greece. So welcome, Pamela. Thanks for being with us here today. And I would like to ask you to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your journey in education and also your work here in Brussels at Quest.
Great. Hello. Thank you for the invitation and for putting student socio-emotional development to the center of educational discussions. As you mentioned, my name is Pamela and I'm coming from Greece. My journey in education started back in 2018 when I graduated from the Department of Language and Literature of the University of Athens. I started working as a teacher with primary school children, both in the private and public sector. And during the time that I was teaching, I also pursued a master's on children's rights with a focus on education. The last couple of years, I joined Quest, an organization, a network of educational stakeholders that aims to promote inclusive, democratic, and green education through policy development, advocacy efforts, and through activities on the ground.
Thank you, Pamela. So you have experience in education by working closely with primary school children, which is the target group of our project. And I would like to ask you how this has shaped the way you think about children's social and emotional development.
Okay, so I think that these years that I worked with children, they really shaped my understanding of children's socio-emotional development. I realized about the importance that the environment and social interactions have for children to be able to unfold this development. I noticed that this process is not linear, but it's dynamic, and being in trustful and healthy environments, it really helps them to grow socio-emotionally. So also this experience made me realize about the importance of self socio-emotional learning in the educational settings and the responsibility that schools hold in properly integrating self in the curricula, but also in the overall functioning of the school.
Now, I would like to move a bit to one of the main parts of this podcast, which is to talk about school systems, which I think you understand a bit about, and children's emotional lives and emotional development. So, from your experience, what do you think prevents education systems from properly integrating social emotional learning into their curriculum? And maybe you could share with us a moment in which you realized that this was clear to you.
Great. So in the recent years, it has been an effort from European educational systems to integrate CEL in the curricula, but this has mainly relied on standardized methods of learning. What I mean is that in the framework of subjects like literature or language, students have been introduced to concepts such as empathy and collaboration, but the learning has remained theoretical without these values being practiced in school. And this has been really clear in my case when in one of my classrooms, some of my students could really easily explain what empathy or collaboration was, but they were really struggling with like navigating conflict or working together with others. And this was a moment that I realized that the learning, it really remains theoretical, but the skills are not really acquired in practice.
And what kinds of social or emotional challenges do children you think do children often face in high pressure school
Environment.
environments?
Um, I have been in some of these kind of environments that they really put some pressure on children, and it was always regarding achievement and grades. So what I noticed is that children become more competitive. They get anxious, and they face difficulties in building meaningful relationships. So these are some of the struggles that I have seen them facing in these kind of environments.
That's very interesting to us because, as you already know, and maybe our listeners as well, in Mind Matters, we aim to develop a triple and develop and pilot a triple psycho social and emotional resilience toolkit for primary school students based on LifeCom that maybe you already know about, which is the European framework for the personal, social learning to learn key competencies. So if we take LifeComp as a reference from a LifeComp perspective, how do social competencies like empathy and collaboration, you think, help children to navigate these challenges you just mentioned?
Great. So the LifeCom framework, I think that aims to foster these life skills in the classroom, which are very important also to quest work and in the democratic education that we aim to mainstream. By fostering empathy and collaboration in the classrooms, we really help in creating safe environments that children collaborate with each other, and they create empathy towards their classmates and educators, which really facilitates the process of learning, and creates a culture of a classroom culture of trust and empathy. So I think it's really important of establishing this framework in every European school.
Okay, and now I would like to move to democratic education and practical examples because I think at Quest you work a lot on democratic education, and I think it's a very interesting term. So, for listeners who may not know the term yet, could you tell us what is democratic education? What does democratic education look like in day-to-day school?
Great, thank you for the question, because it's true that when we approach educational communities and we work with educators, it's rare that they know about democratic education. So I think that explaining for the general public what democratic education looks like is very important. So, democratic education is grounded on the pedagogical approach that children are active participants of their learning. Students are not seen just as listeners, that knowledge is transmitted to them, but they make decisions on their learning process. For example, they decide which subject they would like to explore and what topics they would like to work on. They decide about the schedules that they would like to follow, and they also participate in the decision making of the rules of the school. So, also, when it comes to the relationship between the educator and the student, it's more cooperative than one that we know in traditional schools. Educators act as guides that they help students in exploring topics, making decisions, and learn how to learn. So we see that it's more based on the human rights values that it really embodies in its function.
Thank you. I think it's a very interesting term and a way of educating. How do you think this approach helps students to develop skills such as autonomy, collaboration, critical thinking, resilience?
Mhm. So I think students in democratic education they develop these life skills because they are given a voice over their learning and real responsibility. They learn how to trust their judgment and their choices, so they become more confident. When they need to make collective decision making or work together on project, they learn how to navigate different perspectives and collaborate with their peers. And all this process requires negotiation and uh, collaboration, so problem solving skills, and this way they sharpen their critical thinking. And this all happens in an environment that children feel safe. So when they fail, they build resilience because they have the space to feel vulnerable, and that really creates the space needed to develop all these skills.
You mentioned, Pamela, that in democratic education, schools are seen as safe spaces where students can show vulnerability and develop resilience. Mm, could you share with us a practice or approach that teachers in traditional schools could start using in their own classrooms to foster that kind of environment?
Yes, sure. One approach that is used in democratic schools, and I think it would be very beneficial if more the traditional schools adapt, is nonviolent communication. NVC is a communication framework that teaches children how to communicate their feelings and needs without feeling ashamed or judged, and how to listen to the needs of others without blaming them and with empathy. We think that if educators start adapting this way of communication, they will really help to foster the environment that is needed for children to acquire the skills that we are talking about. NVC is a four-step process. The educator first approaches, no, sorry, the educator first observes the situation, after approaches the student or the group of students and expresses how the situation make him feel or her feel, and then they explain the needs behind these feelings, and they conclude by making a respectful request toward the student or the group of students. And over time, when students observe this approach, they start adapting it as well in their daily interactions, which will lead in a more trustful and empathetic school environment in the future.
Nice. Thanks for sharing. That's a very interesting approach. And now I would like to ask you about the Booster project, which we really like here at CheMop, and we have read a bit about it, which used animal assist activities. Could you tell us a bit more about the project and how you think working with animals supported children's well-being and social skills?
Great, thank you. So we consider Busta as a successful example of how project-based learning can really foster these kind of competencies. In the framework of this project, our participants, who were school-age children, visited centers that they provided animal-assisted therapy to children with disabilities, and they came across real world challenges. They work together with their peers and educators, and we think that through this process, they built competencies like empathy, communication skills, and problem solving skills that in traditional school settings they could not really acquire because of the framework.
Thank you, Pamela. If you could change just one thing about mainstream schooling to better support children's social and emotional development, what would it be?
If it If I could change only one thing, I think it would have been the way that students are perceived by educational systems. Traditional children have been seen as passive learners that educational systems aims to shape them. And I think that we can sorry. I think that in order to build these trustful and open environments, we need to start seeing children are active contributors and collaborators. Only then we can create this environment that children can develop their social, emotional, and academic competencies.
Is there anything important about children's social and emotional development that you feel it is still overlooked in many schools?
Uh, Again, based on my personal experience, what I have noticed is something that it's not actually overlooked but misunderstood in many cases, and is the challenging behaviors that children may have in the school setting. In many cases, educators approach these behaviors as a problem that needs to be fixed and not as a signal that a student is facing a challenge or they have unmet needs. I think if we shift focus and we approach these behaviors in a different way, we can really support better children and their socio-emotional development, of course.
Okay, and now to close, thanks a lot, Pamela. I would like to ask you what practical tip, just to close in a nice way, what practical tip would you give to educators who feel constrained by rigid curricula, but still they want to support their students' well-being?
Great. Thank you for this question because it's true that I have been one of these teachers that I was feeling constrained by the curricula, but I really wanted to support my pupils' well-being. So I know that educators they are burdened with a lot of tasks, and what I can suggest as a first step is modeling this behavior and building this environment by being open and actively listening to their children, to their students. Also, being cooperative and not judging is really helpful. So, this could be a very good first step. And as a second step, what I really think it helps, it's cooperating with civil society organizations like MOP and Quest. We have many projects that we engage them, and we like to equip them with all the tools and the sources to better meet the needs of their students.
Thanks a lot, Pamela. I think your insights into democratic education and children's well-being reminded us that children's learning, or in this case, primary school students, it's far more than just grades. I thank you for being with us in the Mind Matters podcast, and see you soon.
Thank you a lot.
Thank you.